just a second. We have a panelist missing, so maybe we wait 2 minutes.
Okay. Who is missing?
Mr. Păslaru. Mr. Păslaru, MEP.
Yeah. Maybe we can start and Mr. Pislaru will join us.
Yes, we can start. We just call him. He will connect in a couple of minutes.
Yes, that's so we can start.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon to all of you from rainy Brussels. I am not at the EESC, but I am in my office. My name is Dragica Martinovic, and I will be moderating this event today. Before we start, I need to tell you some housekeeping rules. And this is the language regime, which is English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Polish can be spoken. And you can listen to English, French, and German for the participants in the Interactio meeting. Now, if you wish to take the floor, you have to click the raise hand button. And after you were given the floor, you can then click speak and you will be seen and heard by the other participants. We have today very limited time for a very broad subject, so I would appreciate to keep the speaking time to maximum 7 minutes so we can have time for a debate with the audience. Well, having said all that, now I would like to warmly, officially welcome you to today's event, jointly organized by the Association of European Chambers, Eurochambres, and the Employers Group of the European Economic and Social Committee. Both organizations have the benefit of EU business sector at their heart, and it's at the core of their activities. Today's event is dedicated to EU single market and the lessons learned from COVID pandemic crisis. It is not a cliché to say that the EU single market is one of the biggest achievements of European integration. COVID crisis has put many European main achievements to the test and has revealed strengths and weaknesses of the single market and has magnified the importance of its proper functioning. The COVID crisis has shown how interconnected Europe's economy is and its value chains are, and how dependent member states are on each other for the supply of basic goods and services. In exceptional circumstances of COVID pandemic, exceptional measures have been taken. The vast restrictions that member states imposed at their borders led to a patchwork of rules, the disruption of value chains, and ultimately added to the severe business challenges businesses were facing and disruptions in trade. The fast establishment of green lanes at the beginning of the pandemic can be considered as a very good example of the fast reaction of European institutions. However, as Europe went into the second and third wave of pandemic, in order to protect the health of their citizens, member states, one after another, closed their borders, and the subsequent recommendations from the Council to coordinate and harmonize these measures between member states were not effective. Eurochambres and employers group of the EESC have been a strong advocate for the EU level harmonized approach. However, member states chose to stick to their own often diverging rules. For our immediate future, we need to see the coordinated lift of restrictions and transparent measures, and the proposal for the EU Digital Green Certificate will facilitate this, and the interinstitutional agreement needs to be reached as a matter of urgency. But today, we have every reason to be optimistic as the signs of recovery are present. The recovery is no longer a mirage, it is underway. These are the words of the Commissioner of Economy, Paolo Gentiloni, presenting the Commission's spring forecast last week. The vaccination rollout is picking up speed, and it is time to take a step back to evaluate how the crisis impacted the single market and how it can be a powerful resource for a stable economic recovery. And on this positive note, and notwithstanding all the remaining challenges and risks for our recovery and better future, I shall give the floor to our distinguished speakers of today. And first, I have the pleasure to introduce Stefano Maglia. Mr. Maglia is the president of the EESC Employers Group. He is an expert in EU affairs, specializing in EU structural funds and SME financing. He is also a former president of the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry. Stefano, you have the floor. Stefano?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Martinovic. I was waiting to be given the speak button. So good afternoon to you, Dragica, and to all our colleagues and friends who are present here today. And I would like to start with a special thanks to Eurochambres, to their availability to organize this event together, and a special thanks to Deputy President Louis, who is with us today as one of our speakers. I'm very happy that we are organizing this event, which is based on the past and excellent relationship we have had over the years, built through many events that we have held together. This indeed is the first event that we are organizing together in this new mandate of the European Economic and Social Committee. It is positive to see that our excellent and long-lasting relationship leads to initiatives such as this, as we consider them important for creating a European business ecosystem that provides opportunities for companies to grow, boost jobs, and create prosperity for all. In this regard, I would also like to thank Ben Butters and his team, as well as you, Ms. Martinovic, and Ms. Otto, members of the Employers Group and of Eurochambres, for their active contribution in the organization of today's webinar. As the Employers Group within the European Economic and Social Committee, based in Brussels, we feel that we have the important duty of providing the link between the entrepreneurs we represent and the political level in Brussels. This event is a great opportunity to connect business reality and the European level. Indeed, in our list of speakers today, as you will surely have noticed, we have people from the political sphere and people directly from the business sphere. This bringing together of the two realities is a key priority for us as the employers group, because it is only by a thorough mutual understanding of each reality that we can be effective in designing appropriate and effective policy whilst ensuring that we create a flexible business ecosystem. The presence of Mr. Sieber, who is the president of the HTI group and a person directly involved in the day-to-day business, and the participation of Ms. Isabel Lopez Guerra on behalf of the Portuguese presidency and Mr. Pilasaro on behalf of the European Parliament, as well as the message from the Commissioner, will enable us to bring the two realities together and provide a unique added value to this event. The participation of business representatives in our meeting was a key point of my program as president of the employers group. After a year of pandemic, we are all aware what it means to live through the biggest economic crisis since World War II. The IMF estimates that the world economy contracted by some 3.5% last year. The pandemic brought the integrity of our single market under heavy pressure. Cross-border intra-EU trade in goods declined enormously, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. Value chains were disrupted, and unemployment would have surged to unknown levels without the large-scale job retention schemes that took place. To add to all the complexity, the impact of the COVID crisis hit the internal market unevenly across sectors and countries, which might lead to a dangerous distortion of the sensitive balance of our single market. So this is something we still need to look at and to make sure that we handle. However, as was mentioned, the recently released spring forecast of the European Commission underlines that the pandemic will continue to set the course for 2021 and indeed 2022. We are still in time of high uncertainty, as the economic developments will largely depend on the success of the vaccination programs to contain the pandemic, as well as on the rapidity of lifting of restrictions. The good news is, as was mentioned, that the EU economy is already showing signs of recovery, and the spring forecast projects a more promising development of the economy than that was forecasted by the winter forecast. I'm also firmly convinced that despite current challenges, the COVID crisis also presents us with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the EU. Because, as most of you know, history has shown us that large-scale crises force us to significantly rethink and create opportunities to rebuild better and put Europe on the path of a sustainable, green and digital recovery. As a positive example, we can name the acceleration of digitalization. According to data from the EIB investment survey, 50% of companies expect that the COVID crisis will lead to an increase of digital technologies in the medium to long term. What is clear, however, and I am very keen on this message, is that we can never be caught unprepared for such a pandemic again. We have suffered unimaginable economic damage, and even more tragic, considerable loss of life because we were unprepared. We saw the recent WHO report which came out last week, which exactly passes on this message. With the bitter experience still very fresh in our minds, we must start preparing for the next possible event, which may be closer than we think. And this cannot only be the remit of governments. In many cases, it was with the assistance of the private sector that national governments responded to mitigate the impact of the COVID crisis. It is in partnership with the private sector that governments must prepare to ensure that next time round we can respond faster and in a more coordinated and effective manner. And I'm looking at my watch to try and make sure I keep within the time. The 750 billion euros that are made available through the Next Generation EU package can and must be the fuel we need to use this pandemic as an opportunity. However, for these funds to be able to unfold its full impact, we need a speedy and targeted implementation, which must result not only in the restoration of the single market, but rather it should result in the completion of the single market. Having said this, I indeed very much look forward to hearing the assessment of our speakers and the participants of today as to how we can turn this COVID pandemic into a powerful lesson for the future. Thank you very much, and I now pass on the word to Vice President Louis. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just to double check, I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, very good. So once again, good afternoon. And let me say that it is a great pleasure for me to be able to have introductory comments on this important meeting. I would like to warmly welcome and salute Mr. Stefano Malia, who is the president of Group 1, and all the participants, also our Madam Moderator. And of course, despite the fact that I understand his intervention will be provided only by video, I would like also to salute Commissioner Reinders. And allow me to apologize, President of Eurochambres, Mr. Christoph Leitl, who cannot attend the meeting for today. And last introductory but very pleasant remark, I understand that both EESC President and our president of the Group 1, Mr. Stefano Malia, are people who belong originally to the Chamber family. And that's very important and of very great significance, because it clearly shows how Eurochambres is very strongly interconnected with EESC. So let me also thank to everybody who participated, both on the side of Eurochambres and on the side of EESC and Group 1, for preparing today's meeting. I will start, as I must, of course, with the pandemics. We all have heard how pandemics has hit the European economy. We are very glad that for the most countries, we can now say that we are coming out of the worst. We see the large improvement of the numbers linked to pandemics, and we also see both global and European predictions of the spring economic forecast, which indeed say that this year our growth should be in Europe around 4.2% and next year around 4.4% in real terms. So it is expected that the EU economy as a whole will return to the pre-crisis level by the end of 2019, by the end of 2022. But this is only a part of the story. First, the aggregate figures do not mention particular countries and particular regions, and also do not mention what kind of enterprises and entrepreneurs will be enjoying the restart and rebound of economic growth, and which entrepreneurs and which type of the companies will struggle for much longer time. And I would like to say that I believe that large companies with multinational coverage, with a strong technological basis, will rebound very quickly. But the bulk of the membership of Eurochambres, which are mainly small and medium scale enterprises, they might be hit even harder. And this is the first point which I would like to underline, that from the point of view of Eurochambres, this is the policy for small and medium scale enterprises, which should be directed to their rebound as well. Second, when I speak to epidemiologists, both in my country, but also on a European level, there is more or less a common wisdom that what we can expect might be a fourth wave of pandemics, which might hit still in the autumn this year after the summer. Maybe not, but maybe yes. And that's the second point. We should be prepared. And if the pandemic rebounds to some extent, and I hope, or I'm almost convinced that it will never rebound as strongly as it did either last year or in the first weeks and months of this year, still we should be prepared, both from the point of epidemiological measures, economic policies, single market policies, not to allow for the closures of the same dimension as we have seen it in the recent past. In the Czech Republic, we speak about autumn with COVID, to be prepared and to be able to overcome if, God forbids, the pandemic hits again. I would like to stress that it is the single market which was under heavy strain, and I can understand that in the worst time of pandemics, regional and national governments were taken particular policies which led to the closure of their regions and countries. Nevertheless, in the time of the restart of the economic growth, it is on the contrary of a paramount need and paramount importance that we will be able to utilize the advantages and the contributions of the open internal single market to its utmost importance. We have seen several recommendations of the Council. We have seen the signals from the countries. So we should do our best to keep the markets to be open as much as possible. We should be able to prepare the policies to restart, be it policies like the industrial policies, be it policies of the particular support, be it policies of the recovery fund. It is a coincidence, it's a sheer coincidence, but let me share with you just a few minutes ago, when we were starting our today's conference at 4 o'clock, there came a message from the today's afternoon session of the Czech government, which approved the National Recovery Plan, which is going to be sent to Brussels. So virtually in these minutes, the Czech government approves our plans, and I know that many other countries are. But the plans are one thing, and we should be able to utilize the financial and the resources utmost to be able to achieve the clear and strong restart of our economy. It's not only the policies, it's the support of the competitiveness and the recovery of the whole EU economy on the global scale to be able to compete with other regions in the world, to be able to embrace the technologies which are going to increase the value added, digitalization, the Internet of Things, and many others, which we used to speak about very much before the start of the pandemics. But of course, the pandemics overshadowed these policies, and we must return to them as quickly as possible. Digital green certificate is also of utmost importance because it should give its holders, vaccinated people, people with antibodies to COVID, and people with negative tests, access to non-essential traveling within the EU. And here allow me to stress 5 points. There should be no discrimination between EU citizens and free movement of people, and that should be strengthened. All vaccines which will be approved and considered safe and effective should be covered by the certificate, and mutual recognition should apply. All efforts to have the system recognized worldwide should be pursued. In parallel, countries in the immediate neighborhood to the EU, namely Northern Ireland and West Balkan countries, should be integrated in the system. Force a minimum common standard for tests in order to avoid further restrictions are encouraged. And lastly, but not least, developing a digital enhanced international certificate of vaccination should be harmonized among WHO and EU, as well as efforts to have the system recognized worldwide. And last, I would like to mention one sensitive thing. We have seen many commendable attempts in the European policies, namely Green Deal and others. And let me reiterate, I understand these are very commendable goals. But we should be pragmatic and flexible, not to let these goals to undermine a quick, flexible, and very deep recovery of the European economy. We should be able to understand particular needs of particular countries and to be able to avoid unnecessary hindrances. Let me stop here. Let me once again thank you very much for all the organizers. I wish you a nice discussion and apologize because of other engagement. After some times I will have to leave this conference, but I wish you a very nice discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vladimir, and thank you, Stefano, for your brief but comprehensive overview of the issues that are present now and that challenges that await all of us in our recovery, and especially in the competitiveness, and especially with the care of the SMEs sector in Europe. Now we have prepared a video message by European Commissioner for Justice, Didier Reynders, and I would like if you can put this video on.
Mesdames, Messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to thank you for your invitation to this event, which is on an essential topic for all European citizens. The internal market is a major success of the European Union. We need to protect the internal market because it is the engine for economic recovery.
the COVID-19 pandemic has had a strong impact on the single market. Diverging public health restrictions and border controls have affected millions of jobs and families. The Commission has therefore worked relentlessly to foster coordination among Member States to lift barriers to our fundamental right to free movement. The Council recommendation on this topic that was adopted last October has been a useful tool, and it remains a solid framework to work with. This is one of the lessons that we learned from this crisis. More than ever, we need to work together. We need a strong coordination between the Commission and the Member States to provide for a common approach to the challenges of limiting the spread of COVID-19. Unilateral decisions restricting freedom of movement cause fragmentation and disruptions to essential supply chains and transportation. They jeopardize the EU's internal market. To avoid this, we need targeted, proportionate measures, not blanket border closures or travel bans. In cases where problematic restrictive measures were in place, we engaged directly with Member States to find solutions. Our work was already successful in a number of Member States. Where problems persist, we will continue our outreach to national authorities for more coordination. But at this stage of the pandemic, we also need to forge an effective and lasting path towards reopening and recovery. This is why the Digital Green Certificate is an important political priority for us. It will provide citizens with a reliable and safe tool when they travel during the pandemic, and equip Member States with a trusted way to verify certificates from other Member States. The Digital Green Certificate will thus make it easier to wind down in a coordinated manner the COVID-19 restrictions in place. Our goal is clear. We want to have this system up and running by the end of June to be operational for the summer. And I'm very happy to see that Member States are committed to this project. The Commission is encouraging the European Parliament and the Council to strike a political compromise in May. In parallel, we are preparing the rollout of the technical infrastructure. Testing will start already this month. We are progressing well, and I want to thank you for providing your support for this project. To conclude, let me assure you that protecting the single market and our fundamental freedoms is a priority for the European Union. With the Digital Green Certificate, we can begin again to trade and move around with ease. We will start to rebuild the economy while ensuring the highest standards of public health and safety. We are determined to act for all businesses to soon have much better times ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this video from Mr. Reynerts, the Commissioner Reynerts, confirming that the Commission is proactive in finding solutions for our imminent and near future in restoring free movement of goods, people and services. Now, after these welcome speeches, we have come to the time for our panel discussion, and for which we have with us today the representatives of the Portuguese presidency, of the European Parliament, the representative of the real sector, and the employers group of the EESC. And prior to giving the floor to our distinguished panelists, let me point out some of the challenges for the single market to become really single. We know that even before the COVID crisis struck, that the single market was not really single and needed much improvement. What is needed is efficient enforcement and proper implementation of existing rules on national level, together with cutting red tape, administrative burden, and complexity of cross-border trade, which is especially important for our SMEs. We need less quantity and more quality legislation. And as has repeatedly been emphasized by Eurochambres, we need proper application of the SME test and think small principle. The new single market enforcement task force needs to be developed into an inclusive and transparent consultative body involving key stakeholders. Involvement of EESC and Eurochambres and other business organizations with the Fit for Future platform is a very good tool. And to be better prepared for the new crisis, the Commission has just recently proposed the creation of a single market emergency instrument. Many questions are yet to be answered with regards to the scope of this instrument and its final objectives. But I'm sure more about this we can hear from our panelists. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Ms. Isabel Lopez Guerra, who is a counselor for the International Market, Better Regulation and Tourism at the Portuguese Permanent Representation to the EU, currently holding the presidency of the Council of the EU. Ms. Isabel Lopez Guerra, you have the floor.
Thank you. You can hear me. Thank you very much. Thank you for the organizers of this event for inviting the Portuguese presidency to speak in this important and very timely webinar. So my first initial words are to stress what we all have been said, but we need to reinforce it. That is that since its foundation, the European Union has faced many crises, but the COVID-19 pandemic has overturned our way of life. Very fast, we all understood that only by continuing to act together in a spirit of coordination and solidarity, we could overcome this crisis. And this is a motto that is also guiding the Portuguese presidency during this first semester. The Portuguese presidency has been in the middle of this crisis and is doing its utmost to address the challenge that we are all facing in all domains. In this short intervention to you all, I would like to touch upon 2 points. The first one on the impact of the crisis in the free movement of goods and services, and what we are doing at the council level to mitigate its impact. And the second one on the future measures to reinforce the resilience of the internal market in the face of future crises, including on enforcement of EU legislation and barriers, as pointed out by Mrs. Malia. So we would like, on the first point, on the impact of the crisis in the free movement and what we are doing at the council level, I will start by stressing that this crisis highlighted the essential need to uphold the free movement of persons, goods and services in the internal market, and the need to work together to strengthen its resistance to disruptions. We have faced border controls and closures, national or regional restrictions, as well as containment measures restricting the free movement, often exacerbated uncertainty and costs of compliance, causing serious delays and leading to major disruptions of supply chains in many industrial ecosystems and sectors. Green lines and other EU ad hoc measures significantly alleviated the potential harm impact of unilateral and uncoordinated national measures across the single market. The Portuguese presidency, mainly talking now in the field of the competitiveness, has been discussed these matters at the Council and at other forums such as the Single Market Enforcement Task Force. At the Council level, ministers have discussed at the Compact Council of February the resilience of the internal market. We have also organized several meetings at the Working Party, at the Internal Market Working Party and the Industry Working Party to discuss with the member states, delegations, the lessons learned from the COVID-19 crisis, the existing shortcomings, and how to give the single market a new impetus by delivering concrete actions. At the SMET level, which is co-chaired by the Commission, and the SMET member holding the Council presidency. So for this semester, it's co-shared also with the Portugal. Those issues are also being addressed. On the 19th of February of this year, an emergency meeting of SMET took place in the context of the large number of new travel restrictions and newly introduced controls of the internal market borders that we're currently witnessing to deal with increasingly difficult epidemiological situation and the spread of new COVID-19 variants in many areas across Europe. To help us in this discussion, the Commission published recently on the 8th of May an update of its new industrial strategy that was adopted in March of last year. This update answers the calls from the Council in its conclusion of the 21st of September of last year on deepening single market for a strong recovery and a competitive, sustainable Europe, which were endorsed by the European Council of October of last year, in order to identify the challenge and lessons coming from the COVID-19 crisis, to further accelerate the green and digital transition, and to strengthen the resilience of the EU single market. The communication and the accompanying documents addresses the impact of the single market and on European companies, including an industrial ecosystem and small and medium-sized enterprises. It also takes stocks of the Single Market Enforcement Action Plan and address key barriers to the single market. The Commission has also announced, as it was already mentioned here, that a new proposal will come in order to establish a single market emergency instrument to provide a structural solution to ensure the availability and free movement of persons, goods, and services in the context of future crises. The Portuguese presidency is discussing this set of documents together with the member states, and the topic will be also at the agenda of the Competitiveness Council ministers that will take place at the end of next week. The presidency intends to promote among the ministers a debate on updating the updating of the industrial strategy and an informal lunch where a debate dedicated to the post-crisis economic recovery, including lessons learned and its impact on the internal market. To conclude, it is time to discuss the lessons learned from the crisis, the way to reinforce the resilience of the internal market in the face of future crises, and assess the progress of enforcement of EU legislation and on the elimination of barriers. We have now data and concrete proposals that are a good basis for a deep reflection by member states, institutions, and stakeholders that will enable us to address the important and timely topic which also was chosen for this webinar, a renewed vision for the single market, turning the COVID pandemic into a powerful lesson for the future. We are therefore very happy to hear your views on the proposals that are on the table in order to better prepare the single market for future crises and to decide on future actions to strengthen the resilience of the single market for a strong recovery and a competitive, sustainable European Union. So once again, on behalf of the Portuguese presidency, I would like to thank you for this invitation to participate in this webinar. And also, we will be happy to hear all your views. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guerra. I believe also the Portuguese presidency is planning to organize on the 24th and 25th of June a Single Market Forum, and we will be happy to receive all the information possible on that and to see the discussions going on during this forum. Now we come to the European Parliament, and I would like to introduce Mr. Dragos Pislaru, if he is connected. Yes, I see. I would just like to say a couple of words about Mr. Pislaru. He is a Romanian economist and politician. He's a member of the European Parliament affiliated to the European political family of Renew Europe. He is a Renew Europe coordinator of the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs, member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, and of the Subcommittee on Tax Matters. Mr. Dragos is also the European Parliament co-rapporteur of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Mr. Dragos, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really like to say to all of you good afternoon and to thank the European Economic and Social Council Employers Group and Eurochambres for this invitation and for specifically choosing this title for the webinar. I think that it's really, pushing us to be more enthusiastic about, thinking after the pandemics and to believe that right now we should actually concentrate a little bit more on what's going to happen in the future and about the single market as well. Again, when the pandemic reached our continent, I was indeed a co-rapporteur first on the reform support program. It was a tiny instrument, a small instrument aimed at stimulating member states to run reforms. And then being witnesses, you all, of the rapid spread of the virus, and economic consequences, I mean, everyone was asking for a bazooka. So we quickly discussed in the European Parliament how to actually move forward and what are the solutions to renew the single market, to try to make it stronger and more resilient. So we came out with, with these two main ideas in a resolution that was right now, that became part of the history of what's happening right now. So first, we actually assessed that we need the major stimulus for investment in order to foster rapid economic recovery. That's, macroeconomics 101. And then the fact that we really need to run a complex reforms in order to be better prepared when facing future challenges. And we then define that as resilience. And that's how, from the reform support program, we actually got the Recovery and Resilience Facility that was and still is the largest financial instrument ever created by the European Union. So why I'm actually telling that to you, I mean, you all know about it, quite a few details about the fact that right now everyone is submitting the national recovery plans, but it's actually very important to understand that indeed the Recovery and Resilience Facility represents the proof that we've learned something from the pandemic. So first lesson is that we learned that austerity is not always an answer. And the citizens show us that, during the pandemics, they've given instances of solidarity, the unprecedented solidarity when we talk about, young people helping the elderly, when you talk about helping your neighbors or, cross-country support with sanitary materials or with doctors. And we've seen a lot of, acts of solidarity. And I think that the EU, through the RRF, has also, showed that solidarity and mutualization was the way forward. And this was actually, critical to the response that we were given together. So the first thing is about solidarity. The second thing is about ambition and forward-looking planning. I mean, we need to have an ambition national recovery plan and resilience plans, and we need to have an ambition in Europe to actually strengthen the single market and not just recovering to the levels or how the single market was looking before the pandemics. And the third thing, beyond solidarity and ambition, is the fact that we need coherence and synergies on how we spend the money and how we react, generally speaking. And that's why we have in the RRF 6 pillars for reforms and investment, to coordinate in between, the green transition, the digital transformation, competitiveness for our entrepreneurs and for our economies, but then also social and territorial cohesion, institutional resilience, and last but not least, what is very dear to me, focus on the next generation, children and youth. And this would be an ultimate test for Europe as a whole. We are going to see how well this was actually implemented in about 3 years when the disbursement will be ending. And I am right now a member of the working group in the European Parliament overseeing this process and being sure that what we put there together in the regulation with the Council is going to be respected. But I think that, focusing only about money on money and on economy is not actually the full image. And I would actually dare to add this other dimension that is important, and then to conclude. So I think that the single market, it's certainly not only about the economy, it's also about people, about European Union as a society. And I think that on the 7th of May, when we had the EU leaders, the Commission, the European Parliament's representatives, together with social partners and civil society representatives in Porto, reinforcing their commitments for the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights, this discussion about the social model or social policy in Europe is actually very well connected to the single market as well. And indeed, at the summit, we were talking about work and employment, and that is very much related to cross-border work, and to the fact that we need to be sure that we are going to promote that in the future. It's about skills and innovation. It's about having the digital component. It's about creating the right skills for the future of work in the future, in the upcoming years. And then the welfare state and social protection is very important, because I really believe that we are right now in a situation in which social policy is not, doctrinary charge as in the past. Social policy and the fact that we don't need to leave anyone behind is in the interest of both, let's say, the left wing or the right wing of the spectrum, because right now we have the extreme left and the extreme right really pushing, populist messages combined with nationalistic, Eurosceptic messages are actually, ignited by fears and uncertainty in several vulnerable groups that we still have in Europe. So it's very, very important for our economy to be running, but at the same time to look at the vulnerable categories and listen to them and make them, feel that they are actually included. And I think that the targets that we've set in Porto, with the 78% of people aged 20 to 64 to be in employment, 60% of all adults to participate in training every year, and this is a very ambitious target, and the fact that we would need to reduce the number of people at risk of poverty and social exclusion with 15 million, which include 5 million children. These are really goals that should actually reinforce the single market. And I will just end by saying that I'm also a member of the industry committee, ITRE, and the single market is also about industry, indeed. I've been, hearing the discussion about the industrial strategy. We are actually in close touch at Renew Europe with Commissioner Breton. The fact that we need to consolidate our value chains and invest in the 14 ecosystems described in the recent months are really important thing, and these are very much linked to the dual transformation, the green and digital one. And I think that the pandemic is actually exacerbating, some of the structural challenges that we have. And right now, it's actually quite crucial to go at the real sector. And I'm glad to share this panel with representatives from the real sector, from the real economy, because there is actually the engine that we need to fuel in order to reinforce the single market. And again, Eurochambres can play a major role into fostering that innovation that Europe needs in order to regain what is called right now our strategic autonomy. And with all these ingredients, the economic and financial perspective, the social and not leaving anyone behind, dimension, and all with the industry and entrepreneurial dimension that I've just been mentioning. I mean, we have right now the opportunity to properly renew our single market, reinforce it, make it more resilient, and show that we exploited the opportunities brought forward by this pandemic. So let's do that together, and thank you very much for the invite and for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your inspiring speech on many issues that you cover. I am happy that you have mentioned jobs, and after this devastating effect of corona crisis on economy and employment, our recovery is about growth, but also about jobs. And also you have mentioned something that is extremely important, that about the right skills for the jobs, especially for the upcoming transitions or ongoing transitions of the European economy, digital and green. So now, as you said, we come to the real world, and we have a representative from the real sector, Mr. Anton Zeber, who is a CEO, chairman of High Technology Industries that manages and owns all companies associated with Leitner and Poma, Prinot, Demak-Plenko, and Lightwind. I'm sure Mr. Zeber will correct me if I said something wrong or missed something, but I just want to add that in 2019, the HDI group generated a turnover of 1.05 billion euro. Worldwide, the group has more than 3,800 employees, and I'm sure Mr. Zeber has plenty to tell us. Mr. Zeber, you have the floor.
Mr. Zeber, your microphone is open.
Okay. Are you able to hear me? Okay, fine. So good afternoon to all of you. Thanks again for the invitation. As you described us, we're part of the real world. It's difficult to get more real than us because we are an industrial group that is known under the name of HDI and includes different kinds of companies. And I would like to give you a brief presentation. You gave already a brief introduction, but I would like to give you another brief introduction for you to better understand the challenges that we have faced over the last few months or over this last year. So some of you may know the some of the brands of the group. If you're a skier, so we have different sectors. We separated the group into different sectors. One is the ropeway sector for urban applications and ski resorts. Brands that we sell or we build ropeways with are the name Leitner and Poma. Agudio makes material transportation systems. Snow groomers are known under the brand Prinot, and they also make utility vehicles and vegetation management systems. Snowmaking under the name of Demak-Plenko, and Lightwind, we manufacture wind turbines. As you said, we have in 2019 we have generated a worldwide turnover of a little bit more than $1 billion. This year, we just closed our financials, and we will be around 900 million. But despite the decline in sales, the slight decline in sales, we are going to we're going to have the same number of employees also in 2020, and it will be around 3,850 worldwide. We have, as you can see here, we have production sites all over the world. In Europe, we have 14 production sites, from Italy to Austria to Germany to France to Slovakia, and I think that's it. So, and then all the other production sites all over the world, like in the US, Canada, India, and China. Here are some examples of of our products. This was in Kitzbühel in Austria, Sexton Dolomites in Italy. These are all projects of last year. Alanya in Turkey, where we're also operating this cable car. In Mexico City, we're currently building 2 more urban transportation systems with ropeways, and then we will have 3 systems like this going through the city with a length of 25 kilometers. And we also have to maintain those systems. Other example in Pisa, at the airport of Pisa, Berlin, France, Korea. We also completed this last year. We started a second ropeway in Santo Domingo this spring. Miami at the airport, we're also operating this system. We're also operating the system in New York City that connects Manhattan with Roosevelt Island, and have about 25 people stationed in New York. This is a material transportation system in Germany, also completed last year. Snow groomers are being supplied all over the world. Utility vehicles from Brazil to Thailand. Also, these go to pretty much every country. Vegetation management, we end up with those even in Africa. Innovation is incredibly important for us. We're developing proprietary technology, and the markets for each sector is worldwide not that big, so proprietary technology is key. Here, snowmaking and wind turbines. As I told you, innovation all over the group is very important for us, not only because the life of our passengers are hanging on a rope, literally, but we think innovation is the future, so we have a very big focus on innovation. So this is pretty much it. I just want to give you a quick overview for you then now to understand why, as a company, we focus on a decentralized strategy. We got to be close to our customers. We got to be close to the different markets. And despite talking now within the realm of the EU, the laws in the ropeway sector are different from country to country. So France, the laws are slightly different from Germany, Austria, or Italy. So we need to be close to different customers, to our country, to different countries, and languages obviously are different. So this decentralized strategy is key for us. And as you have seen, the disruption that we saw as a private company goes way beyond the supply chain. You got to imagine, I'm sitting here now in Südtirol, in this small region of Italy. We are generating as a group only 4% of our sales here in Südtirol, 8% in Italy. So being able to move around, not only in Europe, but all over the world becomes key. So I think I would like to remind the words of my favorite philosopher, Sir Karl Popper, who said always that closed societies do not have a future. And we got to understand that. And this will become more and more important over the next few months or over the next few years, because closed economies will lead, or societies will lead to intolerance, ignorance, injustice, and inequality. And I think just we gotta finally understand that from the beginning, we human beings have traveled. For example, we walked from Africa for the first time to Europe and colonized Europe. Then we spread goods, we handled and negotiated goods, but also ideas. So it becomes very important for us to have open borders. And in this sense, I think it's important also finally to understand that single markets or globalization, whatever you want to call it, superficially, are not evil. There is no way back, finally. We have to understand that also ideas, hindering ideas from spreading. And we noticed over the last few months how that, or over this last year, how difficult it was to innovate or to keep on innovating. I just want to make an example. Our head of the R&D here in Stelzing asked me, when can we again go to the cafeteria and eat with the welders or with the electricians? Because this exchange, this informal exchange is so important. When can we travel to France to meet with our French technicians from Poma who have a different approach, which becomes also so key. Unfortunately, all this went missing during this COVID pandemic. And I understand that this is not the first disease or the first pandemic that we encountered as human beings, and it will not be the last. But just avoiding to live to not to get sick is going to be a very difficult task for all of us. So I think what I would really hope that we don't continue giving this impression that we will never get sick again. Yes, COVID was an exception, but the world has changed. It's much smaller. It turns much faster. It's not just a question of goods and human beings that are moving across countries, but also ideas and knowledge. And I think this we should not forget over the next months when we try to prepare or to learn out of this, to learn our lessons out of this last pandemic. And I unfortunately have to mention something that I think is key. Democracy, unfortunately, seems to have reached its limits during this pandemic. We've seen that democracy is just too slow to react to a world that has changed. And I think it's not a curse word if we talk about adapting our democracy, our democratic systems, to have a sustainable system that allows us to move much faster and decide much faster and take clear responsibilities and give clear responsibilities to the different people that have to make decisions. And it's good that we fortunately have an EU government, and I'm a big supporter of the EU, of the single market and of the EU. But I really do hope that over the next months, there will be a clear responsibility in the future that allows us to, let's say, to cope with the next pandemic in a more efficient and effective way, because the next pandemic will come. It's just a question of when. Thank you again for inviting us, or inviting me in this case, and hope we'll find a better way of dealing in the future with these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seber, very much for your intervention. I especially appreciate you taking a step back and taking a wider view on global your global world and the need to keep the values of open trade with the world, and of course learning the lessons from the pandemic and securing our essential supplies in the future. But to have free and open and non-protectionist trade globally is extremely important for all of us. It is important for competition. It is important for innovation, of course. Thank you once again very much. Now I have the pleasure to announce my friend and colleague Maria Helena de Filip Lehtonen, who is a member of the EESC Employers Group and is the spokesperson for the SME crafts and family business category. Ms. De Philip Lettonen has a strong background in championing SMEs. She is Policy Vice President of SME United, Vice President of Confederation of Spanish SMEs, and President of Catalonian Federation of SMEs. Maria Helena, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Federica. Thank you for your kind words. If you allow me, I will move to the Spanish. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Speaking on behalf of the small and medium-sized groups for craft sector and family business in the European Economic Social Committee, we'd like to share some thoughts with you which relate indeed to real life. Looking at the measures taken against COVID by the regions and national and European authorities, we tackled this a bit too late, badly. We tackled it as best we could. And certainly not everything we've done has been as effective as it might have been, not least because of lack of information. So when we talk about closures in particular, activities having to close down, that's affected an awful lot small and medium-sized businesses in sectors like retail, trade, hotels, restaurants, nightlife. And there have been a number of investigations carried out in Europe, and 1 out of every 4 of the companies that closed because of COVID has not survived. And let's not forget that. And we have to consider how we can deal with this, as Mr. Zeber was saying. We're not sheltered from any future pandemic or disease and things which might change the life we're used to. So SMEs during the pandemic has had problems, and we didn't have raw materials often, and we've suffered losses. And also, I have to say that generally speaking, it's affected our credibility. Our industry, and to a large extent, is increasingly in the hands of Asia, as Mr. Rodriguez was saying, and from the Portuguese presidency. If you consider what small and medium-sized businesses do in Europe, some of us are internationalized, and we have 13% microeconomists, 15% are small, and 23% are medium worldwide. So we're far away from being internationalized. So we need to grow more in this respect. Especially micro and small businesses in Europe. Now, on the digital subject, which we discussed today in the EESC, we have been working on an opinion on the opportunities of teleworking. And, well, we say we can't really go back to the past. A majority of workers, according to the International Labour Office, telling us that they're actually quite happy with teleworking. Obviously, they have to deal with things like technological stress and various other issues, but on the whole, even not 100% happy, they get along fine with this. So we heard a lot about going back to how things were, but some things will not go back to how they were before. Because in fact, to a certain extent, be a waste, and the economy can't really afford it, not least in terms of a sustainable economy which we're seeking for Europe and the worldwide and in the level of our own resources. So this is something we've debated quite often. I think it's an important subject. There are 3 lines which I think will be very beneficial or profitable in the digital world for SMEs, digital markets, for example. And it gives something in terms of equal access to markets for SMEs if you do this digitally. Moreover, we need to protect data. We need to be ambitious on that front. It's particularly important for small and medium-sized businesses. And so we need to work more to get an ambitious digital act. And then the green transition requires some clear standards. We need to be transparent, and they should not lead to confusion, particularly if that's to our disadvantage. So I'd like to express our satisfaction to your taking the initiative organising this meeting with Eurochambres. And what we seek, all of us in SMEs, is to see a proper green and digital transition brought off successfully, not least thanks to the green certificate, which will enable us to move around. Let's hope that's going to work by June, and that everyone will be able to, in Europe, take advantage of that to have a much easier mobility accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Helena. Thank you very much. Very difficult to touch such important subjects in very short time, but I believe we have some time for discussion and questions and answers. So I would like to open the floor to your questions and or comments. And as I said at the beginning, if you want to take the floor, please raise hand button, press raise hand button, and then you will be given, when your time comes, the floor you can press speak. So I open the floor for Q&A. You're welcome to ask your questions. And while looking at who has raised hands, I might start with one question, which is open for debate. As I have mentioned already at the beginning, we had in order to protect the health of citizens, member states were doing their own closing of borders. These measures were not proportionate and were not harmonized on EU level. The Council has issued recommendations which they didn't work. Maybe our panelists can give their ideas or possible solutions for the next crisis or for the next health crisis, as it probably will come, hopefully not soon, but we have to be prepared. Thank you. And I shall have, let me see if I have any questions, any hands raised. Let me see. Yes, I have Mr. Malia. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dragika, and thank you to all the speakers. It has been a very useful and I would say also interesting number of speakers with interesting interventions. Now, my point very much ties to a point which I raised in my intervention, which is the involvement of the private sector vis-a-vis planning ahead. Unfortunately, sometimes I very often feel that we pay, or a lot of lip service is paid towards involving, let's say, the social partners in general. But then when it comes to the crux of the matter, and here I specifically refer to the recovery and resilience plans, the national plans, where the social partners should have been involved in their drawing up. Our own research has shown that this has happened sparsely and in not a very meaningful manner. And therefore, this does not bode very well, one, for the quality of the plans, but also for the role of the social partners in devising these plans. But I still think feel very strongly, that the private sector has a role to play in preparing a more resilient Europe, now be it the single market, be it even for the health union, of building a resilient Europe for the future and for future pandemics, which, as we have also heard from various speakers, could be not too far away itself. So my questions would be, number one, to Ms. Guerra. She mentioned the involvement of the social partners, but I would like to know if there are specific ways and instances in how she thinks we as employers could be involved. I'd also like to ask Mr. Sieber if he, as an employer of over 3,000 people, of a person who depends very much on an entity which depends very much on the single market, whether he feels that indeed the private sector should play a role, and if yes, how. And then also for Dragos, I would like to also comment on the fact that he referred to the social aspect and also to the element of no one should be left behind. I would like to reassure Dragos that these are very much sentiments which are shared by the employers group, and indeed we believe that that moving forward, it is only a strong recovery which will allow us a strong economic recovery, which will allow us to have prosperity, which will in turn allow us to have a strong social policy. So in our minds, these are all very much interlinked. And I sometimes also worry when I hear a lot of discussions, is that almost it seems that one seems to exclude the other. It's almost as if you talk about the economy and economics, you are almost excluding the social aspect. And this, I think, is very wrong. In our mind, these are interlinked. Strong economic recovery will bring prosperity, and prosperity will allow us to have a strong social Europe. And I would also very much like to have maybe his reactions also on this element. Indeed, I was myself in Porto for the social summit, and I was very pleased there to see that the social partners were involved in this time round in the political commitments. And I would like to assure you, Dragos, and also our other distinguished speakers, that we are very firmly committed to having a fair and social Europe, which, however, is based very much on competitiveness and a strong recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. I have another raised hand from Mr. Paul Rubig, and I would propose to hear his question, and then I will give the floor back to the panelists to answer. Thank you. Paul?
Yes, thank you so much for this very interesting meeting. We have also a big debate on taxation, and there is a request for a minimum corporation tax from 20 or 21%, which maybe for a lot of countries in Europe would be too high. But anyway, this debate will come. So my question is, could we have a maximum level of wage tax? So I think it would be very important to reduce the cost of the working force. So if on the one side they ask for having a minimum tax on corporation, why shouldn't we ask for a maximum tax, maybe also 20% for the workers who do the daily job? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor back to the panelists. So please, the floor is yours. If you want to take the answers in order of your, however you would like. Yes, I have Mr. Vislaru Dragos. Please.
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, I would like to thank President Stefano Maglia. I mean, we've always been aligned. I was actually quite happy to interact with the European Economic and Social Council in the past as well. Let me give you some more or less more confidential information right now, but I mean, again, you will find it, just in a few days. So we are right now working in the European Parliament at a resolution that we want to put forward as part of the monitoring working group and of the scrutiny that we have actually put in the regulation when I was negotiating. So this is a joint motion resolution on the right of information of the Parliament regarding the ongoing assessment of the national recovery and resilience plans. And there is there a provision says, first of all, that we would like to, so it's called, it recalls the Article 18.4Q of the RF regulation stating that national recovery and resilience plans should contain a summary of the consultation process conducted in accordance with the national legal framework of local, regional authorities, social partners, civil society organizations, youth organizations, other relevant stakeholders, and then calls on the Commission to prompt member states to consult all national stakeholders to ensure involvement of civil society, local, regional authorities in the implementation of the plans, and in particular its monitoring, and that consultation takes place for future amendments or new plans, if any. So this is what you are going to find in the joint motion resolution signed by, supported by all political groups, all major pro-European political groups. And this is part of the work that I'm actually doing. I'm actually co-signing this particular resolution. So it's not just talking about it, it's also walking the talk from the parliament side. So we have been supporting this consultation process, and we are right now trying to more or less ask the Commission to be more firm on that consultation process and to be more inclusive in terms of being sure that the member states are actually consulting. I mean, in the negotiations, I was actually pushing for the consultations to be a mandatory assessment criteria. Obviously, the council did not agree that, so the compromise was that we have just need to put the summary in the plans. And right now we see that because we failed actually to push it further and to become a mandatory thing in the assessment, I mean, the process is not treated seriously enough. So we are fully aligned here, and you will see us in the European Parliament as being your ally and your, I mean, I would say legitimate force in representing the views of entrepreneurs and employers all over Europe in having them included at the table when you talk about the national plans. Now, related to the issue raised by Paul Rubik, indeed, the issue of taxation would be something that we are going to be discussing in the context of the digital taxation initiatives, the OECD-led things here. I mean, that they are actually important to understand how we are going to do that, related both to the GAFAs, and then there is a separate initiative on the field of taxation related to corporate tax. The problem is that when it comes to the wage taxation, I mean, this is indeed still a prerogative that it's strictly the competence of the national level. And indeed, without actually pushing forward a much more ambitious project for the single market, including the banking union, capital market union, and then maybe a tax union at a particular point, we will not be able to push it that far. But it's always good to see which are the opportunities ahead, to look at the conference on the future of Europe, to see if there are strong views from the civil society, from the business sector, from all the stakeholders, suggesting that we should actually amend a few things to become stronger and have a brighter Europe. And then maybe at one point in the future, we will have the majority to push for more competencies at EU level. Obviously, you will see from what I'm saying, and also from the fact that I'm actually part of Renew Europe, that we are actually a pro-European force, and we believe actually that more Europe is actually better Europe. So thank you for the opportunity for responding to that question as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if Mr. Zeber would like to also revert to the question of the involvement of private sector. You need to press the speak button.
Mr. Zeber?
Yes?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry. So as Mr. Malia said, I think this pandemic can only, or something like this, such a crisis can only be, let's say, overcome by working together as a society. That means that, this is my view, that also the private sector has to play its role, but it needs to be coordinated, clearly coordinated. As I said before, I think, yes, it's something, it's easy to be said, but I hope we learned a lesson that when we see such a crisis appear, we have leaders, and we do have I think, leaders at the government level, but more importantly at the EU level, because again, it's a broader issue. This whole pandemic it involves the whole world. So the EU, I think I'm a big defender of the EU. I think this is one of the greatest achievements of our last century. So we need clear, coherent decisions that allows the system as a society to work together to combat and fight a pandemic very, very swiftly and harshly. So the role, I don't think the private sector should play its role that will be given by, let's say in this case, the political leadership. And I think this was a little bit that we were missing, clear, fast decisions. And the worst thing that can happen with decisions is that we make a mistake, and we can then correct that and learn out of it, learn out of our mistakes. But I think it's the role that the private sector has to play has to be integrated in the whole society. And obviously, as I said before, I think the company or the private sector has social responsibility, and like the whole society, also the private sector or company is just a society in a smaller version. So yes, the private sector has to play a role, but it has to be coordinated with the rest of the society.
Thank you very much. Now we have to wrap up, and I would like to pass the floor for the concluding remarks to my friend and colleague from the Chamber and the EESC, Claudine Otto, who is the Vice President of the Employers Group and the European Legal Affairs Coordinator at the Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce, and is leading the Brussels office in charge of EU affairs. Claudine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dragica. I also see that Mrs. Lopez Guerra Isabel
I
wants
just saw, yes. If we have time, Miss Guerra, if you can be very brief, we are limited with time. Please do have the floor, take the floor. Sorry.
Thank you. I think it was also the question of the participation of the private sector was also addressed to me, and I would like also to support what has been said. I think it's really we are in a completely new era. And we also have to bear in mind that the old model of competition is not really the model. I think we have also to acknowledge that in order to be successful, we have to work in cooperation and not in separation. And that's why also the Portuguese presidency pays a huge attention to the need to involve the private sector in the discussions, in the political discussions. And we have been doing this in a series of high-level forums. You mentioned Porto. I could mention also the informal ministers' discussion where a private sector was invited to give their contributions, because we cannot speak about competitiveness without involvement of everyone. So just to leave this note, and again to say that in order for us to succeed, and we need to work in cooperation and not in separation, and the private sector has to be on board. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guerra. I'm sorry for not seeing your hand. So, Ms. Otto, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Dragica, and thank you to all the speakers for your valuable contributions and active participation. I really found it very interesting. So Thanks again to the speakers and also to the translators and the EESC and Eurochambres, and especially also Kostas and Erwan for organizing this debate, which indeed couldn't have come at a better time, as the interinstitutional negotiations are about to seal the legal text of the Digital Green Certificate. After more than a year of COVID-19, there is a need for perspective, hope, and a certain degree of normality. Businesses and citizens suffered from border closures, supply was disrupted, and predictability was often lacking. An EU-wide recognized certificate is a crucial step forward, but it is not the only important element. Next to a fast rollout of vaccinations, a truly functioning single market is EU's best asset to restart the economy. I will conclude by recalling some takeaways from today's discussion. More than ever, we need a strong coordination among the Commission, Member States and the private sector to build a resilient future and be able to respond faster should there be a rebound of the pandemic. The protection of the single market is a priority for the European Union. The importance for open borders and economies has been stressed at several times, so as the need for political leadership, clear and fast decisions. And the pandemic is also seen as an opportunity to rethink and build a more resilient Europe, taking advantage of the digital and green transitions. And the business community will certainly follow up on further European initiatives to come, such as the Single Market Emergency Instrument, with a view to strengthen the resilience of the single market. So I think I will hereby conclude the webinar. I thank you once again for joining and wish you all a pleasant evening.